Let's move on to our second topic for today. And that, of course, is, and I referenced it a second ago, the Ram race for the seat on Fox and on YouTube was won by Manassas, Virginia. That's like a couple minutes from where I grew up in Northern Virginia. Minnie Tyrell will be moving up to the Craftsman Truck Series. Of course, he's been racing in the Cars Tour, AWA, and a couple other series. He's had some success, and he will be moving up to the Craftsman Truck Series. Has a full-time ride after winning the competition show. Driving the number 14 full-time for Colleague and Ram in the Craftsman Truck Series. Signed to a one-year deal, so he's going to need to go out there and impress in his first year. So I'm personally very happy for Minnie Tyrell. I've seen him in the ranks the last couple of years. A very talented race car driver. He's also a Virginia boy. I'm from Virginia. He's from Virginia, so I'm always gonna support a Virginia boy, especially a Nova boy. He's from Northern Virginia, so that makes me even more hyped up about it. I'm very excited to see him moving up in the NASCAR ranks. But I think they made a lot of mistakes with this show. I still haven't seen the last two episodes, mainly because I've just been going through it the last couple of days. Plus, they kind of spoiled the ending of it, but that apparently wasn't a big secret in the garage and throughout a lot of the NASCAR community. I was going out of my way personally to not figure out who won it. I feel like I could have figured it out at any time, and I went out of my way to avoid it because I wanted to be surprised. And Minnie Tyrell ended up winning the whole thing. The release schedule was god awful in my opinion. I felt like it was on the back burner for Fox. I almost felt like NASCAR on Fox and Fox in general were trying to bury the series because they were just showing the episodes at completely different times throughout the week, really weird release times. And if you were watching purely on Fox and not on YouTube, well, I think you're what, like 6 episodes in or something if you've watched on Fox. Like the finale hasn't even aired on Fox yet. I don't think the finale airs on Fox until Thursday or this week, I think. So the release schedule was just completely awful. I did like a lot of the things about the show. Chris Rice, I have seen the complaints about Chris Rice. A lot of the Chris Rice stuff I was fine with, but some of it I'm like, Chris Rice, you're not the host of the show. You're part of the show for sure, but you're not the host. And I felt like he did more hosting than the actual guy that was supposed to be hosting. The guy from what's the show called? Can't remember the show right now, but yeah, I felt like Chris Rice was more of the host than he was. So I think it sounds like they are doing a season two. It sounds like they are doing a season two, and I'm happy they're doing a season two. And I think there is a whole bunch of improvements they can make. Probably the biggest thing would be the release schedule, though, because the way they had it set up with the release schedule, even if it wasn't, what's it called, a non-secret throughout the NASCAR garage and the NASCAR industry, even if it wasn't that, if you took a look at the ARCA entry list, and you have to enter an ARCA race before you can enter one of those 3 races. If you took a look at the ARCA entry list when it got released a couple of days ago or whatever for the Daytona ARCA 200, you would already know that it was either Minnie Tyrell or I forget who the other person was because there's only 2 people from that show that were on the entry list for the ARCA race. So you would have figured it out. Oh, it's one of these 2 guys right now, and one of these guys is competing for it, and one of these guys isn't. So I got that guy's the winner. So I just think they did a really bad job when it came to the releases, when it came to the secret. Everything else I was perfectly fine with. I was fine with them charging, like giving people points for commercials and media day sort of stuff because that's part of the job. That's part of the job. That's how they get sponsorships. So I was perfectly fine with all of that. I think the only thing I may have had an issue with when it came to the actual competitions themselves was Chris Rice, and then we're trying to throw cautions at like the road course of Virginia International, and I was like, please don't do that. They ended up not throwing it out. They threw it out a couple times on the short track, but they threw it out for every race, so I didn't have too much of a problem with that. But I'll send it to Tyler first because I know Tyler has watched a good amount of the show. I don't think he has finished it yet either. But Tyler, how did you feel about how they did Ram race for the seat? And would you look forward to a season two?
I'd absolutely enjoy a season two of it. I think it was a great idea of a show. I just think it came too late in the season, so it was obviously rushed. You had a lot of things that they just didn't work out very well. You could tell who they had involved. All of it just wasn't as put together as it could have been. If they're smart, if they can get season two onto Amazon Prime, I think that's the
That'd
way
be
to go.
better, yeah.
I I know Fox is trying to bring things in. Good on them for doing things outside of the box, but better off Prime. Prime does better production with that kind of thing, and I think they'd have a little bit more control and better with the releasing
Yeah, I
for
couldn't.
sure. The show itself though is was pretty well done. I mean, for what it was, I enjoyed it. It was cool to see those kids out there having something to fight for. Like you said, they had to go through each thing that NASCAR's involved with: media, short track, every type of different track. I mean, the only thing that bothered me, I think, mostly is they didn't tune those cars to all be what they could have been, like tuned the same and stuff. I get, like, obviously in NASCAR, not everything's ever going to be the same, but still, they could have done the cars a little bit closer, things like that.
Yeah, there was a couple of people also in that show that I had personally never heard of, and I'm pretty in depth when it comes to a lot of this stuff that I personally have never heard of that really impressed me. I forget what his last name is. I feel bad. That Ryan kid that was a pure road course racer, and he was kicking ass on ovals. He was doing great. I was really impressed by him. I think he has a bright future in NASCAR if he wants it because he seems like a natural talent. Carson Ferguson, I think's the kid's name. I think he finished second in the show. I had never heard of him before. Apparently, he also has a brother. I've never heard of either of them before. And Carson Ferguson was phenomenal. The Kelly brothers, the Kelly twins, they looked pretty good. Casey, especially. They impressed me quite a bit. I've heard of Landon Huffman before, but to see him out there performing, especially later on in the show, was impressed by that. Michael Christopher Jr., I've heard of. He did really well. There was a couple people that I think just did really well in this show, and some of them I have never heard of before this show that really impressed me. And they've kind of gotten some of them have gotten their names out there. I feel like pretty much everybody that was on the show are better off afterwards than before the show when it comes to sponsorship and social media engagement and all that stuff. But all these people that were on, all the kids that were on this show, kind of need. Well, not all of them were kids actually. A couple of them were like I think Jonathan Cash. He was pretty old. I want to say he was like 38 or 40 or something. So there was a couple of guys that were a little bit older on the show, but I think everybody that was on that show, if they weren't social media savvy before the show, they need to become social media savvy because now we know their personalities, we know how they're like, and I was very impressed. And even though it had a little bit of a drama effect to it, like they would go back to the house and they'd play the drama stuff, and like it was what like Hell's Kitchen or something like that, which I was perfectly fine with because we're going to see how these people actually are and how they interact with other drivers and with other people and just how they would be day to day sort of thing. So I was cool with that as well. But there's a lot of things they need to improve on, and I'm very worried that they're gonna pull the same thing that NASCAR Full Speed did, because the first season of NASCAR Full Speed I thought was pretty good, but there was a lot of improvements they needed to make. Well, with the second season of NASCAR Full Speed, they just got worse. And then I don't think they're doing a third season of NASCAR Full Speed. I haven't heard about it, so I would assume they're not doing it. So I think there's a lot of things they need to improve. And I agree with you, Tyler. I think it would be a lot better on. I think it'd be a lot better on Prime or on Netflix potentially. But we do have to keep in mind that every single Truck Series race is on Fox or Fox Sports One. So that would be a pipe dream, unfortunately. I don't think it's leaving Fox. Unless they decided to do it for the O'Reilly series, then it'd be a CW show. Or if they wanted to do it for the Cup series, which wouldn't happen, they wouldn't give a full time ride to an unknown person in the Cup series. But if they did, maybe that could get on Prime. I agree with you. I'd prefer it on Prime. I think they do everything better. But it will unfortunately be on Fox. So, but I know they've read a lot of the comments, and NASCAR have been really trying to listen to the fans lately. So potentially they read those comments. And Colleague's a very popular race team too. So hopefully Colleague and NASCAR are able to convince Fox to do this bigger and better next year, because I think it has so much potential to be a phenomenal show. Cory, how do you feel about a competition show like this? I think it's a really cool thing to have a competition show like this, because then some of these drivers that wouldn't have a chance of moving up to higher up in the ranks can actually show their true skill, pure skill, and just they don't got to worry about the sponsorships with this show in particular because they're set up for the whole year. That's something they would have to worry about afterwards. But it gets a lot of these kids and older drivers even names out there. How do you feel about a competition show like this?
I think I think it's awesome. Little one because of that. One, you kind of get an in-depth look at NASCAR behind the scenes, and then two, a big one is that these guys get a name for themselves that they normally probably wouldn't. Unless you have
Yep.
Flow Racing, you probably don't know any of those names or heard of any of those names unless you're on the East Coast and you're an avid race racing fan and you just have a knack to go to racing. Like it's hard to find out new names if you're just a NASCAR fan. Versus this gives some exposure. This gives an avenue to watch like up and comers and have another interest or drivers to root for at a young age. So you have someone to root for when they get into NASCAR. And I know it creates a legacy. I feel like it creates another way to get younger fans, another way to just have people who don't watch racing find it, and a handful of people start watch racing because of that show. But honestly, I think that's the biggest thing. I think it's a cool way to introduce the common NASCAR fan into some young and up and coming guys that aren't in the NASCAR series yet, for fans to actually know a little bit about them, root for them, and create a, I guess, a more long lasting audience in a way
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
gets them more intrigued in, the Friday
They
series,
become
the
fans of
Saturday
these
series. I
guys.
feel like correct, and then you start watching the other series because we all know there's people that just watch Sunday, So like, I think there's a lot of things that a show like this, if done correctly, can promote NASCAR in a positive way and create more fans.
Like one of the guys in the show that I feel like showed his personality probably the very most, and honestly didn't do that great I didn't see where he landed in the final standings, but after seven, episode six, I mean, uh, I looked at where he was in the standings. He was pretty low, and this guy showed personality more than anybody, whether it was good or bad. And that was Tanner Reef. I think it's Tanner Reef, or is it Taylor Reef? He has his brother that's in the truck series part time too. So I get the names confused. But the Reef kid, he was the one that argued with Chris Rice in that somewhat viral clip, I guess, probably the most viral clip from the show. But he showed his personality, the good parts and the bad parts, to full extent, which I greatly appreciated. I think some people in the house were rubbed wrong by the Reef Kid, but I became a fan of him personally because he said straight up, and he was the only one that had the balls to say to Chris Rice, "Hey, these cars are slower than the other cars." No one else was going to say shit. But Reef was like, "Hey, these cars are slower than the other cars," and Chris Rice was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" Chris Rice is mad as hell. I think you saw that, Tyler. But that's what I liked about the show. These guys get to actually show their personalities to the full extent, and I know more about these kids' personalities than I know about most NASCAR drivers' personalities because they were able to show it to the full extent. So I think
100%.
season two would be very warranted. I think it has potential to be a really great show, to be honest. I think this could be a show that's done every single year, every couple of years, to be honest with you, if it is done in the correct way, in the correct fashion. Because Roush did this back in the day. That's how we found Kurt Busch and Carl Edwards. And I think they only ran one or two seasons of the Driver X show, but they had a Driver X program before they actually had the actual show where a lot of drivers ended up being discovered from. So I like this idea. I hope they continue to go forward with it and they're able to improve on it because it does sound like they are doing a season two. Chris Rice has kind of made it obvious they're doing a season two. So I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully they're able to make those improvements. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. What did you think about the Ram race for the seat? How do you feel about Mini Tyrell running a full season? I think Mini Tyrell is going to go out there and at least win one race. I think the kid is very talented and has a huge passion for the sport. He was doing better than pretty much everybody in like the press conferences and the commercial challenge and all that stuff. He just overall did great the whole competition. But let me know your thoughts in the comments.